Hello, good evening, and a very warm welcome to this special RoR webinar all around the topic of showing. Now, it's not the first time we've discussed showing in these webinars, but this evening, we're going to be taking things a little bit further, and we're going to look at the practical aspects and also some of the more in-depth aspects of showing, such as going through a couple of the schedules which all of you do have the chance to compete in and qualify for the championships here at RoR. So it's all things showing this evening. I'm absolutely thrilled that you can join me. And I'm just as thrilled as well about the two experts that we've got along this evening. They're no stranger to RoR, and they're certainly no stranger to the showing world. But if you need a little bit of introduction about my two guests, well, I'm going to give you those now. The first of our two guests is Richard Ramsey. Richard is a committee member for RoR Showing. He's also, as we all are here, an avid follower of racing. He's produced many winners. He's retrained a number of former racehorses for both showing and dressage. And he trained at Pollock Vale Riding School, where he attained his BHSI. He's had a number of pupils over the years who've benefited from his knowledge, most notably perhaps Nico de Boinville, the jockey, and also Julian Dollar, who's now manager of the Newsells Park Stud. Richard has taught and judged in Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, as well as France, Holland and Ireland. He's also had a successful eventing career, only giving up through finances, which, let's face it, anybody that's tried eventing will certainly know only too well. But his entry into showing really saw his career take off because he won the Working Hunter of the Year on one of his former event horses, and he helped his wife Marjorie to win the Hack Championship as well. He's ridden over 40 winners and he's helped many others to win and be placed. So really pleased that Richard can join us this evening. Also another, certainly no stranger to RoR and these webinars. I'm delighted to say David Ingle joins us. He's a senior judge on a number of showing panels. He's also the former chair of judges for the British Show Horse Association, in addition to chairing the Showing Council. As director of showing at Hickstead, he oversees the showing sections at both the Al Sharad Derby meeting and the BHS Royal International Horse Show. He's previously enjoyed time as a breeder and a point-to-point rider as well, and trainer, of course, of top-class horses across a number of disciplines. He's a huge champion of the thoroughbred. He's spoken many times on these webinars, actually, as well, about the generosity, honesty, kindness, and just overall suitability of the thoroughbred. I'm sure he's going to pay tribute to them again this evening through this showing discussion. And I'm thrilled to say that both of them do join me here tonight. So the introductions are done. Obviously, my name's Mark. You can get involved throughout this hour-long webinar. You can do so, as always, using the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So just pop your questions in there. We do have a couple of questions that we've already received, but please do send them through. And if I do get a chance, I'll be putting them through to our panel members. So good evening, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to start off, Richard, with you first, because showing, it's probably no coincidence, but showing is our most popular discipline. I think it's fair to say at RoR, we get a lot of competitors coming to showing, taking part in the classes and the qualifiers, and then obviously the championships as well in August. And it's popular for a number of reasons. But maybe you can shed a little bit of light on why you think it's so popular, and maybe accessibility is the reason for that.
Yes, I think that anyone can show. And I think the important thing is that if you have a nice horse or pony for that matter, and it's very much also a family thing, everyone in the family can join in and help. And it's also a wonderful way of getting out and about, and also showing that you can do something which perhaps isn't quite as strenuous as eventing or as expensive, and the same with dressage. And I think it's just the fact that it makes you an all-round horseman.
Richard, we're just having a couple of difficulties with your audio. I heard you really clear, but I think we're bouncing back a little bit. So if you just perhaps turn your volume down just a fraction, it maybe just won't bounce back. We're just getting a bit of an echo.
Right.
If you just turn your computer volume down a little bit, just so you can still hear me, but it'll might just stop the bounce back a little bit. While Richard's doing that, David, there is also perhaps the suitability of the thoroughbred. Now, some people maybe think, well, actually, how suitable are thoroughbreds, particularly former racehorses, for showing? But I think you certainly will feel they're very suitable, actually, aren't they, for all areas of showing?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I'm completely biased, obviously, because I'm a total thoroughbred fan, but that's because they're so adaptable and they're so durable and they're so bright and they're so willing, and you know, they just give and give and give, and they love to learn new things. Some of them, yes, do, you know, everyone says a thoroughbred is hot. I don't really agree with that. I think a lot of people treat thoroughbreds differently, and I'm not sure why they do that. They're just another horse, and we should just listen to them and give them a bit of patience and time, and they pick things up so quickly, and when they do get things, they don't forget them, and they are very, very durable and very, very adaptable, and incredibly honest. I think given the chance, they just will do anything to please you, and if they find something they enjoy, then you're absolutely away.
And physically, they're in all shapes and sizes as well, aren't they? So, you know, you can really find a showing area of the discipline to suit whatever horse you end up with.
Absolutely. There's so many different types, so many different sizes. So there are many different categories in showing, which if you get into the showing side for RoR, which is a fantastic touch point, and again, very accessible because it's at so many different shows. So there's very big and busy shows, but it's also at very small, quiet shows. So you've got all sorts of different access points that might suit you depending on your horse or your experience. So yes, I think it's really important, and the showing has different categories, and so the variability of the types of horse mean that if they then want to go on and dip their toe into showing in a different format, they've got lots of choice, which helps.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to the discussion topics that we've got. We've got a couple of good discussion topics which have been outlined. Actually, Richard and David have put across some talking points for the evening, and also we've also used questions that we most commonly receive here at RoR to try and help us guide through answering these questions. So hopefully this is going to be really useful. Richard, I'll come to you first because our first sort of topic is all about ringcraft. And the first topic or the first area of discussion would be education, both inside and outside the ring. How important is educating yourself across the board, not really just for showing, I suppose, but any discipline, before you get involved? How important is the education before you even step foot in the showing ring?
I think it's very important. I think it's a very good idea to go to shows and watch, particularly the professionals in the ring, and see how they do things and how well they do things, so that you can take a leaf out of their book. The other thing is that I think is very important, perhaps people don't do, is if you are going to a show, it's a very good idea to go and look at the ring you're going to compete in and have a look at all the possible problems, because as we know, some of these big shows are very buzzy, very noisy. And if you realize that there's a generator next door to the ring you're going to ride in, and so on and so forth, you need to learn ringcraft, knowing how to position your horse, and also to be able to avoid trouble, because you might get somebody who is having a problem in a corner, and you need to really have three things. You need to watch your steward, watch your judge, and watch the other competitors. Now, that is quite difficult, but you just really got to get into the swing of it. And it's one of those things, the more you actually do it, the more you get into realizing how much you need to read a ring and read everything that's going on around you. And it's the good old saying, practice makes perfect.
And I suppose it's as much knowing as well sometimes who not to watch. Obviously, you wouldn't name any names, but I suppose, find the people. I suppose my point I'm trying to get across is find the people who do it really well. Who you've alluded to there. Find the people which are absolute experts at their craft and really keep an eye on how they do things.
Oh, very much so. And it's also, don't be afraid to ask them. Because most of the professionals are very approachable, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have to be watching an RoR class. You can be watching Hunters or Hacks or anything, and just look at the way things are done by the top people, because it's a question of saying to yourself, I want to be good enough that I can go in the ring and beat them.
And obviously in these sort of COVID times where hopefully we'll be getting back out competing soon, but in the interim, I suppose you could just as well, hop on YouTube and find some of the showing classes from former Horse of the Year shows, from obviously there's footage as well from RoR, but, right across the showing spectrum, there's a whole load of showing content on YouTube. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good way. In the flesh, obviously, is better. But watching videos does give you a fairly good idea of what's what.
And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'm going to anyway. Is there a particular showing rider that you think is a sort of solid person to watch, a rider that you think is, really worth keeping an eye on as a good, solid role model?
Well, there are several, right? Okay, because I don't want to sort of. They might get big-headed, right? But if you watch somebody like Alistair Hood, for instance, Katie Jerram, Jane Ross, all those people who are steeped in showing, they know exactly what they're doing in the ring. And even sometimes you'll see them having a problem, and it's how they skillfully get out of that problem. And so therefore it's very well worth watching. But those are the sort of people. Robert Walker's another one. There are at least, I would say, half a dozen top people who, as far as I'm concerned, I'm very happy to watch the way they ride in the ring.
Absolutely. And David, I'll come to you sort of to fill in any gaps or add anything that you've got about the education outside the ring, and any sort of role models or individuals that you think are in that preparation stage are worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, I think preparation outside the ring is key. I think, obviously, as Richard said, you must know where you're going, check your environment when you get there, etc. But rolling back before that, and if basing it on the fact that probably a lot of people watching this maybe haven't taken part before, maybe are thinking of taking part, or they're interested. Well, there's lots you can do to prepare. You can really get to know one or two people that are already doing it, ask their advice, approach a professional or a very good amateur for that matter, and ask them some advice. People are very willing to help, and there's nothing like some first-hand experience and sharing of stories. Getting some really good educational help on the ground. Everybody needs somebody on the ground. I think if you have a thirst for knowledge, you are definitely going to be one step ahead. We do tend to see people who either are frightened to ask for help or think they already know everything before they arrive, even though they haven't done it. And that's a big risk if you do that, with the greatest respect, because there's so many variables and so many unknown things. So ask for help, get some lessons, or really work with other people first and foremost. Stand back and assess your own horse. All our geese are swans. We're all the same. We always think ours are better than anyone else's, and that's good. But we must be realistic. So make sure your horse is ready, that it isn't too fat, or it's fit enough, or all those things. Make sure you're happy with the feeding. Very, very important part of what you're going to do, not just because of what you can see on the outside, but also what you're sat on. So that again comes into education and knowledge. all those preparational things, traveling, you know, if your horse isn't used to going to shows, do a bit of preparation, take it places beforehand. The lessons will help, clinics might help. Remember, you're going to possibly go into an environment, if you've had the horse on its own for a while or just at home with a couple of others, and then suddenly you're going to be in an environment where there's a lot of people, a tannoy in a ring with a lot of other horses. Now, the last time that horse possibly experienced that was maybe at the races. So, you know, make sure you've prepared for all of that and you've desensitized and done the piece of training required in order to, you know, manage that. So also setting a few goals. I think goal setting, I like to set goals, things to aim at. You can't achieve everything first time. So set realistic goals that you want to achieve with your horse and that you think are right for you and your horse. And then you will just gradually grow. I think that don't set yourself huge unattainable targets because you'll just disappoint yourself. And so I'd say just take it in small bite-sized pieces, really. So yeah, I think do the prep before you get there. Otherwise it can be, you know, very difficult for you and for your horse and set you back a bit as well if you're not careful.
Richard, coming back to the sort of practice element, have you got anything to add there on how you practice at home before you even go there? And also then how you prepare in terms of looks for the horse? What preparation do you need to make physically to the horse? Anything of note?
Yeah, well, one thing, and bearing in mind, following on exactly from what David said, remember when you take your ex-racehorse and then you put it in a horse box to go to a show, the last time it did that might have been going to the races, and you arrive at the show with the horse dripping with sweat and thinking it's back at the races. I'm a huge believer in getting them to unaffiliated dressage, even just going to any kind of event or something like that and just riding the horse around. I think time is so important. And as David rightly said, you get some horses that take to it like a duck to water, and you've got another one which is going to take months, perhaps even years, before you get it to completely change. The look of the horse is terribly important. They mustn't be too fat. This is the big thing at the moment. And it's very important. But equally, the horse must have a good top line and be what I call rounded, but not gross in any way, shape, or form. And again, your ex-race horse, when it comes to you, you've got to be very careful with the feeding, because it will have been fed quite differently from what you are going to feed it. We're very keen on linseed and barley and things like that. But obviously, you must introduce any new feed very, very carefully, because the last thing you want is a colic case.
Yeah, and actually talking about nutrition, if people go back right to one of the very first webinars we actually did back in December, we were talking about issues along with sort of gastric ulcers and those kind of things, which it's just worth, if you think they're existing when you first get your horse, almost do a bit of an MOT, I suppose, before you even get going with whatever discipline you're choosing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You can use, there are medications that you can use legally for the gastric ulcers. Obviously, with the thoroughbred, being able to turn them out is a huge help on good grass. But also get your vet, get the teeth checked, get the back checked, all those things, so that you start, as you say, with a good clean MOT.
And David, obviously, if you want to continue that point, but also perhaps bring in the discussion of prohibited substances, because that's a big concern when we're looking at feeding and we want to be competing.
Yes, I mean, it's something that, if people compete at an FEI, a large FEI discipline, are much more aware of, and if you don't, then you won't be so aware of. And in showing, there's a lot more awareness about it, but RoR is under FEI rules, I believe, and so is the most of showing now. You have to be very careful, and you really should be aware there's some really silly things that can trip you up. So you really need to read the rules. I can't say enough how much you need to read the rules. If you read the rules, it's all in the preparation. So I'm all about preparing. So if you read all the rules, they're all on the website, and read them. If you don't understand them, there's help there for you to understand them, and other people also can help you. But yeah, knowing what you're feeding, being sensible, and making sure you don't feed them anything you shouldn't. So as Richard has already rightly said, you know, there are medications for horses with certain conditions. Getting veterinary advice, they know what the withdrawal periods are if they're treating a horse for a particular condition, and those withdrawal periods aren't exact. So you have, you know, ballpark figures. They can't be, you know, exact, but they can tell you when you'll definitely be safe. So you need to understand those, and some of them can be really simple. And sometimes there's some alternatives to use that are just as good and are not prohibited, but also about how you interact with your horse. So chocolate is a prohibited substance, it's got caffeine in it. You know, so if you sit having a coffee and you rinse your coffee out in the water bucket and then fill your water bucket up, you know, there'll be a residue of caffeine in that water bucket. The other day I went somewhere and they, you know, thought it was quite amusing to give their horse a piece of chocolate, which I found horrifying. And had to say, oh gosh, did you not realize that is not a very good thing to do? And you know, if you were competing, you now would not be able to do that for X amount of days. So and I think people don't realize that, you know, so it is really important. If you're on any heavy medication yourself, and your horse licks you a lot, you know, which some horses do. Some people like the horse to lick their hand, or it's a hot day and you're sweating, and the horse licks you while you're tacking it up, and it licks you for some time, you know, they can absorb medications from you. And if they're tested within a short amount of time, those can be sitting in them. So you do have to be, you know, there are cases of farriers shoeing horses going racing that day. Farriers are on, you know, they notoriously suffer with their backs and all sorts of pain conditions, and quite rightly get looked after by their doctor. But of course, so we've learned a lot in racing through a lot of these instances about how careful we have to be in managing our environment. So it's not to be scared of at all. It's very simple. It's just common sense and making yourself aware of what you can and can't do. People do know, but it's you just have to be sensible.
I think you make a good point, though, in that sometimes I think the perception of banned substances is that they're given deliberately almost as a performance enhancer. And of course, there are certain cases across different sports where perhaps that does happen. But actually, a lot of the time, it's
accidental.
Where you don't necessarily even know. It can come down to almost a bit of a sort of careless, I'm using the word careless carefully, but it is a careless slip perhaps. And the other thing as well, perhaps, that even though a lot of feed companies now sign up to this kind of clean sport pledge, don't they, it still doesn't excuse you taking ownership, I suppose, of what you do with your own horse.
No, it doesn't. I mean, a fail is a fail. It's simple. And the difference is if you realize you've done something wrong and you're completely open about it, then of course that makes a very big difference as to how it's all dealt with. And it isn't scary, but it's there for a reason, to protect the animals from a welfare point of view and to protect people from a welfare point of view as well. So it's really important that we understand what a clean sport is. I mean, I've talked about this subject quite a lot. It's one that I'm quite passionate about, and about regarding education. And I have talked to people, and they don't understand the difference between intentional and accidental, or intentional and non-intentional, as they call them. And that's the first point of how you govern what's going on. And I think, as I understand it, overwhelmingly, percentage-wise, the amount of contamination is accidental. There's very few intentional problems out there. But so it's just a question of understanding it. Don't be scared of it. Just understand it and ask questions if you don't know.
And also realize that sorry, go on, Richard. Go.
There's been a very, very interesting case just lately in racing where the horse was disqualified because they found, when it was tested, that it had a level of arsenic. And they discovered that the creosote that had been used to paint the stables had contained arsenic. So this is something that is completely what I call extraordinary, if you like, and nobody could have foreseen it. But there are certain obviously makes of creosote which you would normally use for your wooden stable, which contain arsenic. And there is something that the poor, in this case the trainer, wouldn't have had a clue.
Yeah. Absolutely, that's quite a high-profile case that's just been going on. Obviously, I mean, the BHA have concluded on it was the Harry Fry case, but obviously not intentional, as you say, completely accidental, but absolutely just highlights how real. And also I would say people that think maybe it will never happen to me, I won't be drug tested. Actually, just to remind everyone, at our RoR championships, we do carry out random testing, for the welfare of the horse predominantly, and obviously across the board in sports, it needs doing to promote a sort of equal playing field. But anything else to add on that?
I'm a bit of a lot of people get worried about things like quarter marks and things like that. I would say if you can't do them properly, don't do them. If your horse is really well turned out and looks great, I as a judge aren't going to go, I like that one because it's got quarter marks on. The quarter marks are there to enhance what is already there, or hide or bring out the good bits or the bad bits, whichever you're doing. It's all about the use of light, light and dark, and moving things forward and backwards. So there's a reason why quarter marks are there. They're rather traditional, but badly put on quarter marks can really damage the look of a horse's back end. A really well done quarter marks can just finish it off to absolute perfection. So if you do well, do what you can do well, and don't do anything you do badly. So learn how to do them and get them right before you panic and think, oh my God, I can't do the quarter marks. Well, don't do them, because it is not a requirement, I would say.
And Richard, going back to ringcraft, let's talk about when you actually get to the show, you're in the ring. What on earth do you do? How do you turn out? How do you trot up? Talk us through a little bit about the actual practical elements of ringcraft.
Well, the first thing is that you must have worked your horse in so that it's settled when it goes in the ring. As a judge, too often I see a horse come in the ring that's too fresh, and the rider is hanging on to it and not allowing it to walk, as it were. They're strangling it because they're worried. And I think the working in, this is again, time and experience, knowing your horse and how much work it needs or how much work it doesn't need. But you go in the ring and you've got to really keep your eye out for everything, so that you need to, and so many people when they're new to showing and they all get in a muddle and bunch up together, you've got to use your ring, get out of trouble. And the great thing is your idea is to impress the judge with you and your horse. So your turnout must be immaculate. The horse must be immaculately turned out as well. And you have to go in the ring, I would have said, with a bit of a swagger, because I've got the best horse. All the rest are rubbish. You can only look at my horse. It's very much what I call a mental attitude. Again, if you watch a lot of the pros, you will see that they do walk in the ring saying, listen, I'm going to win this. And you can see it in their attitude. You've got to sort of develop that. But I think the important thing is being able to ride the ring to keep your horse in a rhythm and going as best as possible. And if it means cutting across the ring to find a gap or whatever, then do it. But don't run the judge over.
And how much would you go out of your way to highlight yourself with the judge? What would you recommend? The occasional sort of flirting past the front of them, and then how much would you, as opposed, I'm not saying flirt with the judge, by the way.
No,
I wasn't very successful.
I was going to say,
but you know what I mean.
A lot of riders, they'll walk past the judge and they'll have the reins in one hand to show how mannerly and light their horse is. And then they'll flick the back of their jacket out over the back of the saddle, very nonchalant and what I call, as I say, a little bit swanky. And it is, you've got to go in the ring and sell yourself and your horse. And this takes an awful lot of practice to get to that confident stage of doing exactly that, but it can be done. And if you've got a beautiful horse, which let's face it, you've got a beautiful thoroughbred horse, you should go in the ring and say, I've got something fantastic here. And it is very much a mental attitude.
And obviously, I didn't put it very eloquently, but you answered it very well. So I wasn't talking about literal flirting, just by the way, obviously.
Good, I'm
Well,
pleased.
it depends on the judge.
I suppose what I was sort of saying was in obviously comparing to say a dressage test. So I would go around the outside of the arena before I went in. And if that horse particularly was strong with its extended trot, I would do extended trot down the long side before I went into the arena on the off chance the judge was just having a glance, because then they get the impression, well, actually, this looks like it's the business. The horse couldn't do working trot to save its life, but it didn't matter. That's sort of what I'm thinking. How much do you play on what you're strong in, and how much do you avoid the areas where you're perhaps weak when you're in a ridden show?
Well, for instance, if I've got a horse that's not a very good walker,
yeah,
I will go in the ring last, right? Because they're going to set off into trot any minute. You see what I mean? The other thing that a lot of people make a mistake, you're talking about medium trot and things like that. A lot of people over trot their horses because they think they've got to really flash it down the long side in front of the judge. And actually, unless it's done very, very well, it can look frightful. You know, with the horse back end in one county and the front end in the next county. Have a rhythm. If your horse is a good mover, you just want to set it into that rhythm in, say, in trot and maintain it. And the same with the canter. And also, when you change the rein, the most dreadful habit, which I disapprove of terribly, changing the rein these days, the steward asks and everybody crashes back to a trot, even on the far side of the ring. When I was much younger, you actually stayed in canter across the diagonal, did a couple of strides of trot in front of the judge, bang off onto the other leg to show how beautifully schooled your horse was, right? But they don't seem to do that anymore. And also when you extend the horse, and this is very important, if you're asked to extend your canter or gallop on, again, this is something that you've got to have practiced very much at home to make sure that your horse doesn't, and don't always build your extension up on the corner. Don't get on the straight, dig your spurs in and shoot the horse forward, because it'll probably put in a mammoth buck in the process. So what I call just everything, what I call smooth and flowing as much as possible.
David, I'm going to come to you very shortly, but Richard, just one more thing on that. I know you mentioned over trotting. What about the walk as well? Because I mean, if you've got a horse that is relaxed, a walk sort of really shows a horse's temperament almost, doesn't it? Because especially if you've got a good walk, how much walking would you do, or what would you recommend for the walk?
Well, if I've got a horse with a very good walk, I will happily go in the ring first and say, right, here I am, look at this. It's got a beautiful overtrack in its walk. It's looking through its bridle, ears pricked, and really what I call walking. As I say, the rider needs a bit of a swagger. The horse has to swagger a little bit as well. And the great thing is if you think about actually just riding at home, you walk an awful lot if you're going out for a hack. You don't trot and gallop everywhere. And it's so important to have a good walk. The horse's paces must be correct. But as I say, if you get the odd horse which doesn't really flow in walk, and as I say, in that case, you've got a class of 20 horses, I'm going in 20th, right? So I have less walk time than anyone else.
David, apart from flirting, what can I do in my ridden show?
I think enjoy it. I think is really important. I think going in and enjoying yourself and just relaxing, because there's nothing worse than seeing somebody that's having a bit of a panic and working a bit too hard in front of you. And if you watch, as Richard said earlier in the discussion about watching some of the professionals, and you see how they prepare to go in front of the judge, yes, we as judges, we are trained to have eyes in the back of our head, but we tend to watch to the front of us because that's the bit where you are on parade. So I would say make sure you do your best work in the best places. Do most of what you're good at and little of what you're bad at. So just as Richard has said about the walk, you know, if you go in first, you may have to go around 3 times at walk. If you go in last, you might be lucky to get past the judge once. So if you've got a bad walk, you don't get seen, and you know, okay, the judge will notice they only saw you briefly, but they probably don't realise quite how limited that was. Same as if you know your horse has a fantastic canter and is very obedient, then the change across the middle is a very important way to work, as Richard has said, you know. So get to know what your animal is good at and what you're good at, and use those. You know, so when you've got something where you think, oh God, I hate doing that bit and I'm really bad at it, well, prepare better and do more work on that, but also try and avoid flashing that bit in front of the judge where you are already thinking it's going to go wrong in your head, so you've just increased the chances of it going wrong. So plan it. Planning and preparation is everything, and relax and enjoy, because we can see as judges people who are tense and nervous and worried and start to flap, and it destroys the picture. It's all about the overall picture. It's a beauty contest. So you know, you can easily destroy it by getting over trying or panicking. So avoid it.
If something does go wrong, which inevitably it will occasionally, I imagine it's very similar to other disciplines where you just take that one particular movement, if it's the gallop, whatever, you take that one movement, you think, right, that didn't go well, but let's move on to the next bit, because, you know, it's not over until it's over, really. No,
absolutely. And it depends very much what that problem was. You know, if it's gone down the long side bucking 3 times, well, that's a bigger problem, and you'll probably be asked to leave because it's not safe, and we need to make sure everyone else is safe. However, if it's, you know, you were a little bit tight in the walk, but the trot was amazing, the canter was fantastic, and the judges had a fantastic ride, and the confirmation's perfect, then you're probably going to be fine. So keep going, and you know, just you'll get nowhere by stopping. You certainly won't get out of it. So if it goes a bit wrong, again, don't panic, take a breath, don't forget to breathe, always a good thing to keep breathing, and go again, and just keep going. And I think being very spatially aware, really important. Richard has said this about knowing where everything is. It sounds like it's a lot to do. It is, but don't think of it in terms of, oh my God, there's so much to do, because already you've put a great big mountain of negativity in front of you. It's like, okay, I'm just going to make sure that I've got one eye on the steward. A good steward is always in the right place anyway, so don't worry, they're doing their job, you do yours. And make sure you're planning ahead. As Richard said, really coming up the long side, if you're going to, you know, kick on a bit, firing them off a corner, being prepared around the corner is how you do it, and it looks much more fluid, whereas some people do tend to have a habit of getting straight and then going 90 miles an hour straight away, and that is really not attractive. And of course you then upset your horse and you upset everyone else around you, and so just be calm and enjoy it.
The feeling of doing lots of things at once is obviously going to get better the more you do anyway, isn't it? I mean, at one point we couldn't adjust our stirrups when we were on a horse, you know, or you couldn't drive a car, you know. You just have to, the more you do these things, the more you'll pick up the little, I imagine, the little tips and tricks as you go
exactly along. It's goal setting. It comes back to goal setting and thinking, well, I'm not very good at that, so I'm going to do more of it, and I'm going to practice it, and I'm going to go here and I'm going to do more of it, and then suddenly you become really good at it. So like you say, when you learn to drive for the first time, changing gear is almost impossible, and we make lots of nasty noises and frighten our neighbours to death, but eventually we can leave in the crack of night and no one hears us, so it's all good, you know, we get better.
I don't know why you're leaving at the crack of night, but you can tell me.
Probably to go judging in a very long way away normally if it's me.
And I've been driving for years, but I still stall. I actually crunched the gears earlier on. So anyway. Anything else to add on ringcraft, Richard?
No, I don't think so. I think it is what I call gaining experience is terribly important. And as I said right at the beginning, reading the ring, because all the rings are different, and you may find yourself in a very small ring with a lot of horses, and that is when you have to really show your skill in keeping out of trouble. But equally, in say a great big ring like the Great Yorkshire, for instance, sometimes it's not a good idea to get right round the outside so it takes you 10 minutes. If you want the judge to see you, you can nip across and keep presenting yourself in front of the judge so that they can't miss you. But it is definitely, as David says, and I say, it is what I call practice makes perfect.
David, anything to add to the ringcraft section before we move on?
Not particularly. I think we've covered it fairly well. There may well be some questions afterwards. I think if you've got specific questions and you're struggling to prepare and you want some help, go to people who know, go privately to people who know, professionals. I would say personally, don't plaster it all over social media saying, can you help me with this? And who knows about that? It all sounds a great idea, but what you get is this raft of difference. And then it's really hard. I find it very confusing when you see some of that and you don't know who they are and where they've come from and do they even know. I don't know, maybe they do, but actually you need some one-on-one and you need to know, go to people who really know, otherwise you can confuse yourself to death, really.
Well, we're going to take a little break now because we've got some footage to show you of previous showing winners from RoR. Have a look at this. Some great pictures, great combinations there. I should say as well that those pictures were from the good old days when we could all sit in the same room as each other. But those days will be back. They will be back. So some great examples there, though, seriously, about combinations who've come into RoR Showing and really excelled. And for any of you that have been at the August Championships, we get some absolutely brilliant performances there as well. So some inspiration to get you started. Okay, we're going to move on now to the schedules because this is sounds pretty boring, but actually is a very, very important aspect and one of the bits of preparation that we were talking about earlier on. So Richard, I'm going to come to you first, if you don't mind, and you're going to introduce, we're going to pick out the most popular qualifiers and we're just going to run through some of the schedule wording, if that's okay. Richard, I think, are you ready for the Tattersall Show Series qualifier and final?
Yep. Let me find the correct piece of paper. The Tattersalls, this is where I have to put on the glasses, right?
Fine. All of us.
It's again as you know, they've got to be ex-race horses. They must have raced in Great Britain. That's very important. They should be ridden in a snaffle, pelham, or simple double bridle with a plain Cavesson noseband. The horses should be platted. The first three go forward to the championships at Hickstead on June the 27th, 2021. All entries must be registered with the RoR and include their competition registration number on the entry form. And all those participating agree to be bound by the retraining of racehorses rules and regulation from time to time in force. Please be aware that the show will split the class on the horse's last run in a race, national hunt or flat, and will provide 2 ride judges should the entries exceed 20. Please mark your entry form accordingly. And as you know, all competitors must wear a safety kite mark hard hat with the chin strap. Racing injuries and blemishes will not be ignored in this series. Then it goes on about the prizes offered. And then it says RoR Tattersalls Ridden Show classes held after June the 1st, 2021 are qualifiers for 2022. There are various special prizes like veterans and so on, but it is open to, and obviously the riders must be 15 years over or over on the 1st of January 2021. So that's your open thoroughbred ridden show series qualifier for 2021.
Okay, anything specifically on that you want to add to that generally about that class? Any sort of preparation notes that you want to add, or the type of horse?
No, I think that obviously you need to know where your horse last ran and in what sort of race, so that you can fill in your entry form correctly, because there are a lot of horses that double up. You know, they'll run on a 2-mile race in the flat and then run in a 2.5-mile hurdle. So you've got to find out which was the last one they did.
Yeah.
So you obviously need to make sure you've got the horse's racing record, and obviously reliant on the trainer telling you where it's been, so to speak. And I think it's important that it says racing injuries and blemishes will not be ignored. Now, with this and the novice class, this is a show class, it's a beauty class, right? Yes, conformation, performance, the looks of the horse. And as I rather put it, you wouldn't expect Miss World to have buck teeth and bunions. So in a sense, it's that idea. You don't want a horse with flaws because it is a beauty competition. And we better say Mr. Universe as well, otherwise we'll be accused of being sexist. And again, also, we've had a query, I know, about the novice class.
Richard, just to interrupt. It might be useful actually if you go through the novice show series qualifier now and then make those points, if you don't mind. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. I will read it as it says in the rule book, right? Thoroughbred mare or gelding, 4 years old or over, any height. Riders must be 15 years or over on the 1st of January 2021. Horses should be ridden in a snaffle, pelham, or simple double bridle with a plain cavesson noseband. Horses should be platted. To take part in this class, horses must not have won a ridden open class under any affiliated showing society, including SEIB, Horse of the Year Show, British Show Horse Association, Sport Horse GB, BSPS, BSPA, RoR Tattersalls Show Series Qualifier, Tara Ridden, RoR Amateur Ridden Show Series Qualifier, or any other open class except RoR TBA Challenge Show Series, which is the one where they jump, or other working hunter type classes. Unaffiliated show wins are not taken into account. Horses will be ridden by the judge. Horses will be stripped for confirmation. Horses may remain in RoR Jockey Club Novice Show Series classes until they have won 3 RoR Jockey Club Novice Show Series qualifiers. They are de-noviced on their 3rd novice win, or at midnight on the day that they win an open class, whichever happens first. They are still eligible to compete in the RoR Jockey Club Novice Final at the RoR National Championships. The first 3 go forward to the final at the RoR National Championships Aintree in August 2021. All entries must have a current RoR competition registration and have raced in Great Britain. The class will be run under the rules of RoR. And all those entering horses and are participating in the show agree to be bound by the retraining of racehorse rules and regulation from time to time in force. Again, like with the open Tattersalls, please be aware that the show will split the horse on the horse's last run in a race, NH or flat, Should the entries exceed 20, please mark your entry form accordingly. And again, the same thing about the hats, must have a proper safety hat. And that is very clear, that so everyone should, but I think it's very much, all the competitors should have a rule book and they should read their rules.
And can I ask you just to do the final one of yours, the RoR Tattersall Scottish Show Series qualifier as well?
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, this again, the same categories, in other words, thoroughbred mare or gelding, 4-year-olds, da-di-da-di-da, snaffle, pelham, simple double bridle horse. The first 3 go forward to the championship at the Royal Highland Show 2022. In the event that the first 3 are already qualified, the qualification will go down the line to 4th. All entries again must have a current competition registration and have raced in GB. There will be a highest prize for the highest placed veteran, 15 years or over, run under the rules of RoR. Horses to be ridden by the judge. Racing injuries and blemishes will not be ignored in this series. The 2021 Tattersall Scottish final for horses that qualified in 2019 takes place at the Scottish Horse Show on July the 6th, 2021. Venue for this is the Royal Highland Centre at Ingleston on the outskirts of Edinburgh. So that really sums that one up. And obviously at the moment, this is, I think, and David, I think, will come in on this one. It says horses will be ridden by the judge, but at the moment that isn't happening. And I think, David, can you fill me in on this? Is it July that we're going to start having ride judges?
Well, they're definitely not allowed at the moment under the roadmap guidelines. We're just in my role as chairman of the Showing Council, we're just in negotiations with the BEF and Sport England through to DCMS about how soon we can have them back. I think that they will be back before July. I would, the intention is they'll be back in June, sooner if we can, but we can only bring them back when it's safe to do so. So we're in negotiations, but there is a plan. But we've got to prove that we can do it safely. But at the minute, you're absolutely right, Richard. We can't. So shows at the moment will be done on performance.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I think
David,
that would to clear that one up. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
David, do you want to start with your schedules, and then what we'll do is we'll come back to the issue of blemishes, which we'll bring that topic back up when we've just done these final 3 schedules, if that's okay.
Okay. Okay. Which do you want me to start with the amateurs?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the RoR Amateur Ridden Show Series qualifier, which is the Tattersall sponsored qualifier. So this is open to all RoR and NR competition registered horses, so non-race but in training and registered with RoR, 4 years and over, mares, geldings, owned, produced, ridden by an amateur. We have a definition for that coming up. Riders must be 15 years or over on the 1st of January 2021. Horses should be ridden in a snaffle, pelham or simple double bridle with a plain cavesson noseband. Horses should be platted. The series is open to amateurs only. Those employed in racing will be allowed to compete. Class will be judged under riding horse format without type being taken into consideration. So it means it's judged like a riding horse class, but it's not judged for type. Racing injuries and blemishes are ignored in this series. This class is a qualifier for the RoR Amateur Ridden Show Series final. The judge will not ride at the qualifiers, but will ride at the final. The first 3 go forward to the final at Hickstead Derby meeting on June the 27th, 2021. You've got rosettes 1st to 6th and the prizes, etc. Amateur definition. The rules are as in the rule book with the following addition: that an amateur may not show a horse owned or sponsored by a company or commercial firm. In addition, a person classed as an amateur must not be sponsored by a company in any way or act as a brand ambassador, whether financially or in kind. An amateur is a person who, for the purpose of RoR classes, does not or has not, during the current season or previous season, engaged in breeding, livery, buying or selling, dealing or hiring horses in a commercial capacity. Horses must not have been stabled at or reside in a professional producer's / trainer's yard from January 1st, 2021. Riders must not have ridden any animals produced by a professional stroke trainer in the current or previous season. The horses' riders must not receive any help from a professional producer trainer at a show in the current season. A rider who has ridden for a professional stroke producer trainer in the current or previous season must not have ridden horses at a show. Any breaching of this ruling will be taken seriously and will result in disqualification, etc. So that's the amateur one. That's very clear, actually. So that's really good.
Open in hand.
Open in hand. So again, this is open to all ROR and NR competition registered horses. So raced or been in training, 3 years and over, fillies, mares, geldings. Blemishes caused through racing will be ignored. Horses do not need to be shod to compete in ROR open in hand classes. Horses can be shown in a bitless or in hand bridle. All those entering horses and or participating in the show agree to be bound by the retraining of racehorses rules and regulations from time to time in force. So you need to read those rules, all about the preparation. This class is a qualifier for the ROR Open in Hand Showing Series final. First 3 go forward to the final at the ROR National Championships Aintree on August 2021. So that's a fantastic show. ROR prizes will not be awarded to ROR qualifiers with numbers 4 to 2 or less. However, qualification for the final does stand. And then you've got your rosettes and prizes there. Additional notes: ROR Open in Hand qualifiers held after the 31st of July 2021 will qualify for you for 2022. An NR number is given to a former racehorse that has been in training or raced abroad. So that's the NR registered piece. And in ROR Showing, a horse with an NR number can take part in 2 classes. That's the amateur one, which we've just covered, and the in-hand one, which we've just covered here. So those 2 are open to ones that haven't raced but are registered and been in a yard. And then the final one is the challenge. Is that right? Yeah. So it's a bit more on this one, but this is the mare or gelding 4 years old or over and of any height. Riders must be 15 years or over on the 1st of January 2021. Horses to be ridden in any suitable bridle and should be platted. All entries must be registered with ROR and have raced in Great Britain. So these must have raced. Racing injuries and blemishes are ignored in this series. So the first 3 go forward to the final at the ROR National Championships, which is Aintree in August 2021. The judge will not ride. Horses may be stripped for confirmation at the discretion of the judge. Competitors must wear a safety or kite-marked hard hat with a chin strap. All those entering horses and or participating in the show agree to be bound by the rules and regulations that are in force from time to time. And the class is judged differently. This is a marked class, so the class is judged 50% on jumping, 20% on style while jumping and performance, and 30% awarded for show, manners and suitability to be retrained. So phase 1, so you'll come in one by one and jump. The jumping is judged. So 8 rustic jumps, 3 foot 90 centimeters to 3 foot 3, 1 meter, with a maximum spread of 95 centimeters. The following points to be deducted at the end of each jumping round: 10 points to be deducted for a knockdown, 15 to be deducted for a refusal, 20 points for a second refusal, and elimination after the 3rd refusal or error of course or a fall. Phase 2, the class returns without boots, really important, without boots, often a panic to whip those off, and judged for an individual show and confirmation. In some classes at the judge's discretion, horses might be asked to do a show following their jumping without leaving the ring. So that is something that can happen. This is often the case with a large number in the class, and that does happen. Each horse to complete an individual show of no longer than 1.5 minutes. Really important that you don't go on and on and on, because you've got to think of everyone else competing. It's only fair. Show to include the following movements: walk, trot, canter showing change of leg, extended canter, i.e. gallop, halt and stand, walk off a long rein. Total marks out of 30% for show, manners and suitability to be retrained. So really important you get those elements in, because you will be marked down if you don't. Fences for the final at Aintree can be up to a maximum of 3.6, that's 1.5 meters. And that's that really, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So as everybody that's just been listening to that will gather, then the challenge, the in-hand show series qualifier and the amateur ridden show series qualifier generally ignore injuries and blemishes, yet they are taken into account for the RoR Tattersall Scottish Show Series qualifiers, the RoR Jockey Club Novice Show Series qualifier, and the RoR Tattersalls Thoroughbred Ridden Show Series qualifier. So Richard, back to you, because we have had one of the questions we had come in raise the issue about why we take into account blemishes. This question relates to the Tattersalls series. Can you give us a little bit more light on, I mean, we've just shown there is actually a split 3, 3 and 3. Give us your take on blemishes.
Well, again, the novice, the Scottish and the Tattersalls are what I call straight show classes. In other words, you are trying to present a horse with good conformation, with no blemishes on it, because it is, as I said earlier, a beauty competition. And obviously the judge takes into account the horse's paces, its conformation, and in those classes where the judges are going to be allowed to ride, the sort of ride it gives you. And obviously, you know, if your horse has got 2 massive splints, for instance, then it's not going to stand above a horse that is absolutely clean. Because we are looking for, if you like, it would be the same with hacks, hunters, show ponies, cobs, everything. You're looking for as perfect a horse as you can possibly find as a judge.
And David, there are still opportunities, aren't there? So if we do have somebody watching this that does have a horse with quite a few blemishes, as we've just pointed out there are still 3 routes that can be taken.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, it is something that we hear a lot about, you know, why do we have to take this into consideration? Why do we have to do that? But in actual fact, as you said, there's a very fair split on them. At the end of the day, this is a stepping stone into showing, and it's what it's about. So it is really important that we acknowledge, as Richard said, all the elements that we're looking for. So we have lots of opportunities, but also this is actually, you know, it's called retraining of racehorses. We mustn't forget that that is what we're looking for, as well as all the other things. And that goes an awful long way towards it as well. You know, if you can have the perfect made horse that's immaculate, but if it's not very well trained and badly behaved and unrideable, then again, you know, it's not going to do very well. So we must take everything in balance. There's an awful lot of elements here, and we must remember the retraining. For me as a judge doing these classes, the retraining and what I'm feeling when I'm riding them is very, very, very important. Very important.
And do you want to just talk a little bit as well to another part of a similar question that we had, which was the discussion about the disparity, I suppose, in that one horse may have not raced, or may have raced once, sorry, and another may have ran for 7 years. Do you want to talk a little bit about the definition of the word trainer and pre-trainer, and how this works out and plays out in our showing?
Yes, I mean, I think I can understand that point completely, and I think this was about somebody asking, you know, was it fair that a horse that had only run once was treated the same as a horse that had run, you know, 58 times, for instance, and yes, it is, because we don't know what that horse went through just to run once and why it didn't run more than once. We don't know that. That doesn't come with a narrative. Equally, a horse that, you know, and it may be very difficult to retrain and maybe a real challenge for the rider and the trainer that has it now. Whereas somebody that's had a horse that's run, you know, 58 times and won lots or not won lots or whatever it is, doesn't necessarily correlate to the retraining process that horse needs to go through. I can understand people might find it a little bit frustrating and think, well, that's done an awful lot more racing and it's not fair because this one didn't do any. And yes, the pre-training yards, as you talked about, you know, there's an awful lot of pre-trainers. We can't ignore them. And this is a charity that covers racing in its entirety, horses that enter that system. Wherever they get to, you know, and about rehoming them and giving them a good life, which is what this charity does so well and helps with and promotes. So it's really important we acknowledge that part of the industry, because it's a big part of it. When you're pre-training is a massive part of what we have to do. But I think we have to. There's a barrier, isn't there, as to whether a horse is fairly treated or not, depending on how many times it's ridden. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I very rarely ask how many times a horse ran, because to me it's not that relevant. What's relevant is what I'm seeing in front of me when I get on it as a ride judge. What am I feeling? And the number of times people might think, oh, I'm not having a very good ride. In actual fact, what I'm feeling is really good retraining that's taking place. It might not be finished on that day, but I really like what I feel, and I can see the horses trying, and I can see whoever's doing the work is doing all the right stuff, that the grounding is there. And so that's what I'm judging. Now, particularly in the novice classes and those sort of things, whereas in the open classes, we've got to look, we're looking for a bigger and bigger standard, but we need to trust the judges to do the job which they're being asked to do. So I think that would be my answer to that one.
Another question for you, and then I'm going to go to Richard with some of the Q&As, and we'll try and rattle through as many of those as we can. This question, I assume that you can win an open RoR in hand and it does not affect your ridden status.
Not as far as, no, it doesn't, does it? No.
No.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't. Sorry.
No, it's fine. And also just expanding, there's a couple of questions there related as well about how long you can show at novice level. Well, actually, as we've just explained, going through those schedules, these schedules, even though the wording might seem a bit heavy, actually, they do explain that.
Yes, they do. Very well.
Yeah.
Yes. So the rule book has that answer in it. So whoever asked that question, your homework tonight is go on the internet, look at the rule book, and your answer is there. So
bedtime reading. Bedtime reading.
Yes.
Richard, the first of the Q&As then that we've had in come through the evening. So I am putting you on the spot a little bit with these, but you're well able for these. Richard, clipping, yay or nay is the question. And also, what about makeup to cover scars in those classes where I assume we're acknowledging that blemishes are going to be taken into account? So makeup or not?
Yeah, this is because sometimes you see a horse come into the ring slathered with all sorts of stuff, which actually isn't very nice, especially on a hot day and it drips off. But I think definitely discreetly applied makeup is good. Now, if your horse has a little scar, now this is going back to the blemishes. If a horse has a little scar, you can put makeup on that to hide it, because it's not actually a fault of conformation, as it were, whereas if it's got a pair of curbs, that is. If what I call well done, it's perfectly permissible. What you cannot do is alter the horse's markings. There was a craze for sort of flashing white stars on horses' foreheads some time ago, which met with a lot of anger from the various societies. So you can't black out their white socks or put them white socks where there weren't any, and so on and so forth. But I think a really nice, well-groomed horse, and again, taking David's point with either quarter marks or not, looks really good, but certainly the eyes and the muzzle and the dock and obviously hoof oil, those are to me the essentials. Clipping, I think very much, if I've got an ex-racehorse and he's going to work in the winter, I would definitely clip him. Because then it's much, because of the work, because you don't want a horse losing condition through a lot of sweating and a heavy coat. So definitely clipping. But obviously, in this case, what I call trimming the heels and everything like that, yes, that is essential. Okay. We're going to have a huge drama on whiskers any minute, I'm sure.
Yeah, we actually are. So clipping, that's a good answer there. And the makeup, Richard tells you to do a little bit of contouring, but don't completely change everything. There is a question on, and this question is from Hannah Bishop. She said there's been a lot of recent publicity on whisker trimming being banned in some disciplines. What about in showing? David, you this time first, if you don't mind.
No, it's fine. We've had this before, and actually it's a good question. It's definitely on the table for discussion through Showing Council. We've got a welfare meeting in July, to which World Horse Welfare and BHS are coming as well, because they've got a lot of knowledge on this. The FEI wouldn't have made the decision they've made without, they didn't do it on a whim. And so we're going to talk about it because we need to. It's a big challenge for Showing in particular, because as Richard has said, and I've said tonight, you know, it's a beauty contest and the production and all the rest of it. Whisker trimming for me is something I don't tend to do anyway, never really did. I never saw the point of it. I don't look at a horse now and say, oh yes, I love it, but it's got its whiskers on, so I'm going to make it second. It doesn't cross my mind. I think the turnout, if your turnout is really good, the production is really good, everything else is really good, I don't think people notice it. I think it's one of those things that's a big challenge to us as an industry to face into and discuss first of all, because we haven't discussed it and we're going to, and then working out how we take it forward from there. I would suggest the first step will be that you can't discriminate against a horse that is not, you know, that has its whiskers on, because then that would be, you know, unfair. And then at least there you've got the option. But I don't know what the outcome will be. But it's good that we're talking about it, because it is a big challenge for showing. But at the minute, there's no plans to ban things. I'm not a great lover of banning things apart from prohibited substances.
Okay, good answer, thank you. Richard, back to you. This one, Abby Luty asks, as judges, what qualities are you looking out for in the retrained racehorse classes generally? I hope to show my young ex-racehorse when restrictions allow. I do compete in ridden horse classes elsewhere, but have not competed at RoR. What are the differences, if any?
Well, there aren't really. It's your RoR class is the same as any other show class. In other words, you've got to show your walk, your trot, your canter, your change of rein, and possibly your extension. So if she's been doing ridden horse classes, she will know that that is really the same format with the RoR classes. It is a straight show class. What is possible in this case is that she might have been doing ridden classes where the judge hasn't ridden the horses. And this is, I think, something now that we've had no ride judges for a year. And I would say to all the competitors, you're going to have to be ready for judges to ride your horse. So a lot of practice, get other people to ride your horse at home, have them well prepared. David, I'm sure, will agree with this, as both of us judges, and when I used to ride judge, the number of times I'd go up to say, may I have a ride on your horse? Oh, it's never been ridden by a man before, right? Or, and it's unbelievable. And you look at the shiny, slippery saddle and think, dear God, I hope my insurance is in place. But this is one of those homework things that we've been talking about. You know, if you're a 6-stone girl and you come in the ring, and without casting any aspersions on David, who is tall and rather heavier than 6 stone, you've got to have that horse able to cope with that. The other thing that I think is also very important, and goodness knows again how many times I've had the problem being tall, is make sure your stirrup arms and stirrup leathers the stirrup leathers go short enough or long enough, and the stirrup arms are big enough for the judge's feet. Because if you've got size 3 feet and the judge has got size 10 feet, there could be a problem.
So David, anything to add to that, BFG?
100%. I mean, it's a you know, obviously I'm not that heavy, but I am considerably heavier than 6 stone. But yeah, feet, length of leg, etc., are really important. You know, it is, you know, it's not safe to ride a horse you can't get your foot in the iron, and it's a very common problem. Actually, it's a very common problem. So so just be prepared to have, and if you need to, you know, put another set, you know, you've got your favorite leathers and irons, take those off, put another set on for the judge. It's fine. Take some spares with you. You should have spare reins and spare bits and pieces with you anyway at a show, because things break and you don't want to lose your chance of competing just because you broke something and didn't have a spare.
Okay. Another question for David, and then I'll go back to Richard. David, if your horse has previously raced, but both horse and rider have no showing experience, is there a particular recommendation you'd give as a starting point?
I think just give your horse time to adjust is the biggest thing for me. I think it's the horse tells you when it's ready. It really does. If you're listening to it, it will tell you, you know, when they're ready. Don't rush them, because that is such a bad move, and get them socially accepted in a different way to the way they normally work. So obviously racing, racing life is very structured, very regimented, very straight. So you've got to change that. And some horses take to it really, really well, and they just love a change of life. Others miss it and really struggle with the change of routine. So I think that's the key for me, is taking each horse as an individual, because they are, give them the time they need, and wait for them to tell you they want to do something else. But at the same time, always just keep challenging them just that little bit more. So take your time. You don't have to go to a show. It does not have to be your first outing. You can hire venues with friends. Hickstead, for instance, if you take that as an example, has a big cross-country arena now, and people hire that in groups of 6 or 8, and you can go there for an hour, and socializing with people there and things like that is a really good idea. And that's not the only venue. There are other venues available. But those kind of things, take your time and do the homework, prepare and go places.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, in terms of suitability when looking for an ex-racehorse, are there any recommendations or suggestions that you would give when it comes to temperament or conformation? Anything just generally to bear in mind for people that are starting their journey right now?
Hopefully when you go and look at your ex-racehorse, you will have a chance to see it doing something, being ridden by a lad or lass. And you get some idea of whether it's hot or fizzy or lazy or whatever. But the great thing is, more important, if you are into the showing side of it, you've got to make sure that the conformation is good. In other words, it doesn't have any serious faults, and that it moves straight. That's very important, which you can easily see in hand, and that it is what I call, and again, because the RoR classes, you've got what I call your little flat race types, and you've got your big chasing types. Doesn't matter, because when it all comes down to it, they're all in the same class together, so to speak. But correct conformation is important, and if you are new to this, then find somebody to go with you who knows something, so that they can look at the horse and say, well, you can't have that because it's got a pair of curbs if you want to show, so that's a no-no, and so on and so forth. It is very much looking at the structure. And I think also it's very important, don't necessarily look at racehorses, look at lots of horses and get your eye in on make, shape, type, everything like that. It's very good.
Another one for you. I know this one you enjoyed talking about last time. What type of brow band to wear?
Well, if you've got what I call a hack or riding horse type, a coloured brow band, okay? Now, as I said in the last webinar, I mean, nowadays they look like something unbelievable with all the Swarovski crystals and the this and that and the next thing. But I think this is, people enjoy, they like dressing their horses up and having a bit of flash. I don't mind it at all, but your bigger, what I call chasing type of horse, more your hunter type of animal, I think they should be in plain brow bands. I had a lot to do with a horse called What of It, who was supreme at Aintree a couple of years ago, and he was a great big chasing type of horse, and he wore a plain brow band. It's very easy to get tempted into going, and believe me, these coloured things cost a fortune, right? So as I say, if you've got a pretty little ex-race horse, put it in a coloured brow band. If it's not that pretty, put it in the plain one.
I love how opinionated you are tonight. I kind of I like how opinionated you are tonight. We've had contouring makeup, we've had, yeah. There's the answer. Very well answered. Thank you. David, as a ride judge, this is a good one to ask you. I know judges don't like big knee blocks, says Jenny. Mine are attached by Velcro, so would I be allowed to swap my bigger blocks to smaller showing blocks just for the ride judge and then go back into the larger blocks for myself? Any opinion on knee blocks?
Well, it's an interesting one. I mean, for me, yes, I'd say put the small ones on, because otherwise it's like being locked into the space shuttle and I can't move, and it's really, really difficult for me to ride. Yeah, I'm not a great fan of blocking. I like to be able to feel what's underneath me and feel contact with the horse, and the block tends to push my leg off the horse. So it depends on the seat of the saddle and everything, but yeah, I wouldn't want a great big block for me. You might offer it if the judge came, you might offer it if they're quick to change, then that's fine, but just be careful you don't end up wasting a lot of time, that's all.
Okay, another one, David, for you. Any tips on what to do if you've got a horse that's quite difficult to stand up in a line? I know this is quite a loaded question, but...
Well, again, this is about preparation. Some horses, and this is one of the challenges with thoroughbreds standing still. Not generally, they're pretty good, but some do really take exception to it. But a lot of horses do. But in showing, because they have to stand still in a line while others come in and out, it's very different for them. So this is about preparation, and you can teach horses to stand still. If it's novice, I mean, when I first started judging RORs, and I was there I was there at the beginning before we had an actual panel, and horses didn't actually, not many classes, horses didn't often stand still for you to get on. You were legged up as if, and I was still race riding then, so it was very easy to just leap on. A little bit harder 25 years down the line, but so horses took time to learn to stand still, but this is preparation. But I think don't force anything, because you can cause other problems. Horses can get, they're flight animals, so they can react quite violently and quite quickly to things if you get quite strong with them. So you do need to, a bit like Richard said, get other people on them at home. You can have your own little show at home with your friends, and have a little faux line up, and someone else ride the horses, and just take your time. Often horses, have to learn to stand still. It's not a sort of forcing thing. You can actually take it slower and slower, so horses can come out of line and keep moving to start with, and then stop them for a minute and try and get on, and then move them again. So it's a technique that you have to learn, but you get some professional help if you've got a real problem, because it's a specific problem.
Yeah, well, we're nearly at the end of the webinar, but there's two more points I'll just raise. This is quite an entertaining one, I think. Joan Ahern has commented. She's put, it's very annoying when the judges keep turning around during the competition. So I'm going to let you come back to this. Richard, I'll let you comment on that. I mean, what are you meant to do?
Yeah, well, again, David, I think, will agree with me. As a judge, I watch one side of the ring. Yeah. And when we were competing, which we did for many years, it was a big joke that if we saw a judge whirling around like a dervish, we reckoned they'd lost the plot. But I mean, this is the part of ringcraft, in that you have to, you're aware of the steward, you're aware of the judge, and very often a judge will turn around because they hear something behind them, and they turn around to see a horse looping the loop, and think to myself, well, I don't want to get on that one, and so on and so forth. But generally, as a judge, concentrating on one section of the ring is much, much easier. If you start, to my mind, if you start whizzing round, you just get yourself in a muddle.
Yeah. And really, David, how much should, I suppose, even though I quite like the fact that the judge is probably looking the other way for a little bit of the arena, because you can have a quick breather and, fidget and tidy yourself up and whatever. But actually, how much should you as a rider be really concentrating on what the judge is doing? Is it probably better to get in the habit of concentrating on your show?
Yes, I mean, I think you've got to be aware of what's going on in the ring, as Richard quite rightly started out the seminar by saying. And the steward is the one to really keep your eye on first and foremost, because they're the ones that control the ring, under instruction from the judge. The judge will be in one place. I'd be more worried if a judge kept running around. I mean, they should be standing in one place. If they happen to glance over their shoulder or look round, it will be for a reason. They think someone's left the ring, for instance. That happens sometimes. You've spotted a horse, you like it, and suddenly it's not there. you know, it's gone, and then you look around because you think there's a problem, or you hear something and you want to make sure everyone's safe. So there's a number of reasons you might look round, but a judge wouldn't keep looking over their shoulder, and they certainly shouldn't keep looking over their shoulder, but there would be genuine reasons why they might need to. But yes, I would say concentrate on your own situation and ride the horse before you start criticizing the judge. I mean, let's get your own performance right first, and keep your eye on the steward, because they really are the conductor of that arena, would be my point. I've
just got images of Richard in doing loop-de-loop, so middle of the arena, spinning round. Okay, it's kind of thrown me off a little bit, that has. Okay, I think that's it for the questions. So Richard, one thing I want to bring up actually, which you've mentioned in a previous webinar, which we haven't really touched on, what is the correct way to stand a horse in show for the judge? What is the correct in-hand way to stand up a horse?
If the judge is looking at it from the near side, right, which they normally do, to start with, the horse should stand what I call as if it was on the bit. So in other words, arched neck, in the head in a good position. And the judge needs to see all four legs. So when your judge is looking from the near side, the near fore and the off hind should be slightly apart, and the off fore and off hind should be closer together. So as a judge, I can look at the horse and I say, oh, yeah, lovely clean limbs. And then obviously as the judge will then walk to the front of the horse, look at the front of the horse, or I do anyway, to make sure that it's straight in front, and then go around the offside, at which point the handler should push the horse back half a step so you get the opposite effect. Yeah. And then I go around behind the horse, because I want to have a look at its hindquarters and its hocks and everything, and then ask the handler to walk away and turn and trot back. And this again is homework, like everything else. So many people can't walk, right? They shamble up the ring. So what happens? The horse shambles along with them. And then they turn and slop towards you with the horse looking clinically depressed. It's all part of the actual presentation of making the in-hand part, and people forget this, that conformation section and the way the horse is presented is very important. And I think people think, oh, well, it's gone beautifully, the judge has had a beautiful ride on it, blah, 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 and then they spoil the ship for a ha'porth of tar.
Okay, nice. I love that. Love the opinions again, Richard. Really good advice, actually. And I think it's really useful to discuss that. So thank you for that. And I'm going to throw one more in, and I'm going to throw this to David. Another little bit which we don't talk about very often. When we are stripping horses, anything about that sort of transition that would be a good tip for us to bear in mind? And also, how do we deal as riders when we're standing there with our horse and you as a ride judge are about to come and get on? Any etiquette advice about how we should behave, where we should stand, what we should do to help you?
That's a good point, actually, from a ride judge point of view. I'll take that one first. And I tend to always approach the horse from the front. I'm not keen on, running up from behind. I think you should always go around the front, say, good morning, hello, whatever, just briefly, and come at the horse, appropriately, leg up. It's one thing I would say, please don't do is hold tightly onto the horse's mouth with both reins, quite claustrophobic, because if as you're going to be thrown up onto the horse, if that horse reacts in any way, again, they're a flight animal and they can react, and that has happened occasionally. So some people, if I've ride judge, will know that I go and say, oh, can you just let go of that, please? And the horse with a free head is much easier and safer to get on. That said, you can just have one hand lightly on the bridle, on the rein, but not restricting it. In fact, that you don't really need it, because once the ride judge has picked up the reins, is being legged, and you're away, that's fine. And just stand in front of the horse, really, as or slightly to one side, just in case anything should happen, but primarily in front of the horse, and then you can just stand out the way when everything's ready, just to make sure the horse doesn't sort of shove off quite quickly. Again, it's your horse. Training at home, really important. people mounting it to ride for you. That's a discipline in itself. So it's about manners. It's all part of the manners and the showing process itself. I think preparing for the handover for confirmation, I think my plea would be, please don't come in as if you're going to wallpaper your living room. You are there to help assist as a groom or support for your rider, and you just need, in the old days it was a bit of cloth and a sponge. Now we have to come in with an enormous tack room and a table and a seat and a bottle of wine, and all sorts of things seem to appear which shouldn't be in the ring, by the way. A bottle of wine definitely shouldn't be in the ring when we're talking prohibited substances. But people do come in, and then we line up all these steps, and there's this sort of barricade behind the line, which is completely not safe and not necessary, and it creates obstacles for us as ride judges to negotiate. I like to come back into the back of the line where I left it. You should also have your horse pulled forward to get on as well, by the way, as for a ride judge, and the steward will manage that. But you shouldn't really get on while stood in the line. You should just stand 2 paces forward. But just be organized. Your horse doesn't need a complete groom and brush down. It really just needs a quick tidy up. You might have a bit of time, a bit more time, but when the confirmation judge is ready to have you go, they're not going to look at it and go, oh, it's got a really nasty sweat mark where the saddle was. That doesn't come into it. It's nice if you can sort of titivate a bit and make it look lovely, but it's not 100% necessary. So don't worry too much. Okay, and then in conclusion, Richard, anything to add?
Yes, I don't know whether David finds this. I certainly do. When the judge, whether you're confirmation judge or ride judge, you come up, it's amazing. I know sometimes you can be very nervous about this, but try, and I always say good morning or good afternoon, and sometimes I might be lucky if I get a grunt in reply. And do try, and what I call, without saying, oh, this horse has won 25 championships and blah, 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 which you shouldn't say anyway, but try and interact a little bit with the judge. If the judge says good morning, say good morning back. And smart, and again the same within hand. You've got to have a little bit of presence as well as the horse, and that's quite important. But it is amazing how many people just what I call shram up, and I think you've got to sell yourself a bit as well as the horse.
You see, I would do the opposite. Richard, I would talk to you about everything to try and distract you.
Well, try and distract me from all your horse's faults.
That can be equally annoying, yeah. Mark, I can tell you.
Okay, thanks, David. I think it's time to get rid of you two now anyway. Okay, seriously, David, anything to add to the webinar generally?
No, I just if you're thinking of having a go, just have a go, because it's great fun. It's a really good experience. You'll only enjoy it. If it's not as good as you thought it would be, go again, because it will get better. Enjoy the preparation. There's so much help out there, particularly for RORs. It's a real passionate part of the industry, and there's so many people willing to help. The professionals are always willing to help. There is this fear I think people have of professionals. They think, oh God, I can't ask them. They love being asked. They love, as you've heard tonight, Richard he's very clear about what he likes, he's very clear about what he doesn't like, and he's willing to talk to people about that and share the huge amounts of knowledge and experience that he has. So just reach out and get some help. It's a wonderful set of classes and all the other disciplines that go with it. So just give it a go, dive in, have a go.
And Richard, generally overall, anything to round up advice?
I think it's very easy. You go under a judge, you think your horse has gone really nicely and it doesn't find any favours. There are other judges and other shows. Don't get depressed because you haven't got that first rosette. There are plenty of opportunities, and you can go on improving the horse and yourself the whole time. I think it's a very good thing to remember that a quality horse needs a quality rider. And we talked a lot about the horses, but I think all of you that have got ex-race horses, you've got to really work on your riding.
Okay, excellent advice. Thank you very, very much. It's worth saying as well that a lot of the rules that we've discussed, I know it seems quite heavy, there's a lot to look through. They are available on the RoR website. You can find a lot of this information online. The schedules, which were read out earlier on, can be found there too. You'll be able to read through them in your own time. Do that. Do read up. Go on YouTube if you can't get to shows at the moment. Watch as many competitors as you can. And Richard, Ramsey, David, Ingle, once again, it's been a real pleasure to share the evening with you both. Thank you for your brilliant advice and Richard's opinions. We love them. And we'll hopefully see you both at, and everybody watching this webinar, at an RoR show very soon. So thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you.
There's a whole load of benefits of registering with RoR. You can join for free and take advantage of all the advice at camps and clinics. The competition membership allows you to compete in over 250 classes in 25 different series, covering a whole host of disciplines. We're committed as well to welfare and education. Of course, there are 8 RoR accredited rehoming centres in Great Britain, and you will also find out more about how we rehome the racehorses at the Source a Racehorse site that is available through our main website, the ror.org.uk. Donations can also be made there too. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again soon.